Yeah, draft kind of sucked.
Kind of sucked. How you were expecting to go higher?
I was expecting to go higher. But again, it was just like managing expectations, right? Like, I got to go to the combine, I got to do the Senior Bowl, getting drafted. And I say the draft like sucked. Like, I still got drafted, and that was like amazing and awesome and super cool. But my expectation was that, like, from what I was hearing, was like, hey, you'll probably go maybe first day, probably like second day, round 2, round 3, and then nothing, crickets happened. Right. So I'm sitting there by my phone, me and Whitney and my mom and dad. And I was like, oh my goodness, am I not going to I don't know if I'm going to get drafted. I had like expectations of being drafted and having an opportunity to like compete for a job, to going from that to, oh man, I might not even get drafted.
And so the process works like a lot of the first top 10 picks, you're like, oh, if you're here at 8, we'll take you. If you're here at 5, we'll take you. But I guess it's not like that for like late first round to second round to third round picks. It's not really like that. It's kind of like you just wait by your phone. Teams say they like you or whatever, but you really don't know until the phone gets rung.
Yeah, you really don't know. At least that was like
your experience.
That was my experience. Like, that was my experience. So we would watch it every day, and I would just be sitting there with my phone charged and ready to rock and roll. But the first couple of days, I didn't get a call.
So you get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
Who'd you get drafted by?
I got drafted by the Steelers.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
What was that phone call like? They call you and say, "Hey," are you allowed to tell what happened on the phone call?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to remember. I think Coach Tomlin called me, and he was like, "Hey, we really like you. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Congratulations!" And at that point in time, like, we were all just like crying, and everyone was pumped and excited, because it was like, there's nothing like getting that phone call and hearing, because I remember when I was like 6 years old, I wrote like a little like kindergarten paper, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be an NFL quarterback. And then all of like my whole life, like, felt like my whole life's work kind of came to that like culmination of getting drafted. So it was a thrill and just a crazy experience, crazy time.
Dude, okay, so then I don't even know what specifically to ask, but I would say that your NFL career probably didn't go as you would have expected it, did it? I mean, how would you describe your NFL career?
When I got drafted to the Steelers, I was like, okay, I've kind of been in this boat before. They had been at the time, so I was like, okay, they drafted me to be like a backup. And I was like, unless something...
Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, Ben
right?
Roethlisberger. So I was like, unless something happens to Ben, I'm not like going to see the field or anything like that. And so there was always that like desire to play, to see the field, which, that was hard, because you get caught up in being like, all right, Lord, like, if this happens and that happens, then I may be able to get on the field, play well, and get the contract and go be a starter somewhere. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would have enjoyed the process just way more and just been like, I'm just going to be a backup, treat it like a job, and enjoy it like to the fullest,
So you were always kind of longing for a little bit more.
Yeah, I was always kind of longing for a little bit more. And I want to cut myself some slack too,
Who wouldn't want to just be a starting quarterback in the NFL, especially since you're that close?
Yeah, I was that close. I wish I could go back and enjoy it more, but it was like, again, it was an exhilarating ride. Like, my like childhood hero was Tom Brady. And then luckily enough for me, like, Ben gets hurt one game and I get to play against Tom Brady. And it was just like a surreal like circumstance. Like, in the middle of the game, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm playing against Tom Brady right now. And then after the game, you go and shake his hand and he like, hey, Landry, great job. And you're hearing it from this guy that I was like 10 years old whenever he started playing. And you know what I mean? And that type of stuff.
You met him at midfield or whatever?
Met him at midfield, yeah. Shook his hand. Hey, great job. Yada, yada, yada. And then move on your way.
Wow. That is the coolest thing I've...
It was like, as a kid, like, putting myself back in like me being a kid, that was like so cool.
But what about even just playing in the game? So you talk about, you always like... We're talking about cutting yourself some slack. You always were looking for that opportunity, but at the same time, you just get, what was it like stepping on and taking your first snap, like, in the game? I mean, I mean, were you said you were cool, calm, and collected OU, and so was it like that first snap?
Yeah, I mean, I say I'm cool, calm, and collected at OU, but before every game, until you get that like first hit, it's still butterflies. You're
For
nervous
sure.
and all that stuff. So it was just more of like the normal like nervousness before the game of being like, well, I don't really know how this is going to go, but hopefully it goes good.
But it's football's football. At
Yeah,
that
football's
point.
football. Anything can happen.
Because your NFL career was 4 years, correct? Was it 4 years?
6.
6 years. So then what just took place? I guess you can give a little bit of an overview.
Yeah, so we go from Oklahoma to like we're in the midst of community, had a great church, had people discipling us, to the NFL, to being like we're on our own, like by ourselves in Pittsburgh, which made like our walk with the Lord significantly more difficult.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. You're by yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We're not meant to like live by ourselves. You're not a part of a church. You're just an appendage hanging out to dry.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So
Wow.
that's where we were. And it was just like both me and my wife, Whitney, were longing for community, longing for like family, longing for a place that we could like get plugged in and call home and grow. And it wasn't really like my relationship with the Lord was bad during that time, but it definitely felt like I was in Egypt. You know what I mean? If I could use that term, like Egypt, wilderness, promised land, it felt like my NFL career, my walk with the Lord I was in Egypt.
And why? Just because it was the separation from that home church and then being on your own. It is a lot of change always.
Yeah, a lot of change always, and a lot of like silence. Like he didn't really say a whole lot to me during that time, but what I was doing in the NFL, he was preparing me for what I'm doing now with like being a youth pastor, being young adults pastors. Like what I learned there, it was almost like my discipleship school. Like,
how so? Like in what ways?
Man, if you can deal with wide receivers, you can deal with literally anybody.
Because they say the wide receivers are like the divas or like the whatever.
Oh my goodness gracious, right? So like getting Antonio Brown just to Sunday was like, that was the greatest training for youth ministry of all time.
Antonio Brown.
Of all time, bro. Like, it was unbelievable just to, like, get him to remember his place. Hey, just be on time. Like, don't be late for the game. All different stuff that, like, plays into it, where it's like, now I'm doing youth ministry, and it's just like, at least you guys kind of like me.
Yeah, I'm not having to like Antonio Brown. I cannot believe you just said that. That is going to be a clip for sure. Antonio Brown trained me to be a youth pastor.
That's exactly right. The Lord used them.
That's got to be the title, dude. Holy cow. Obviously, I mean, the amount of hardships, the amount of trials always, I mean, to a certain degree, towards the end of the 6 years, you probably have job uncertainty, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So then, go ahead.
Yeah, no job. I mean, job uncertainty, like all sorts of stuff. It's like it's Romans 8:28. That's what I was walking out. Like, all things work to good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Do you know? I can't remember his name. Oh, he has a great quote of it. I'm so sorry. I can't remember your name, but I heard it and I'm going to use it on this podcast. He quotes it as like, Romans 8:28. He's like, this is the way I read it. The Lord wastes nothing. He gets you ready. And I always remember that. It was just like, wow, yeah, that's so true. Like, he wastes literally no opportunity to get you ready to where he wants you to be.
So you're saying even our worst moments and our failures and something's cropping up in people's minds when they think of it. When you say that, you're saying that nothing is wasted when it comes to the Lord.
I mean, not in my experience. He didn't waste anything. Like, anything that I've ever learned, any door that I walk through, any success, any failure, it's building the man.